Hello, everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Story 1. The plow came too early. The blizzard warnings didn't feel urgent at first. They were the kind of alerts people in northern states learn to ignore after a while. Snow totals, wind advisories, reminders to stay off the roads if possible. I glanced at my phone, saw the notifications stacking up, and went back to what I was doing. I was alone that night, which wasn't unusual. My husband was out of town for work, and our house sat on the edge of a rural subdivision in western South Dakota, where streets faded into gravel roads and neighbors kept their distance without meaning to. Winter made that distance feel even wider. By early evening, the snow started coming down in thick, heavy sheets. Not the light, drifting kind, the kind that muffles sound and swallows detail. The world outside my windows slowly lost its depth, shrinking into a flat, white blur. I turned on the porch light more out of habit than need, and settled into the living room with a blanket and my laptop, telling myself it would be a quiet night. Around 8:30, the power flickered. Once, twice, then held. I remember thinking that if it went out completely, I'd just go to bed early. I had candles, extra blankets, and plenty of food. I was prepared. That's what I told myself. The first strange thing happened around 9:15. I heard a low mechanical sound outside, distant but distinct. At first, I thought it was the wind pushing against the siding, but the rhythm was wrong, too steady, too deliberate. I muted the TV and listened. There it was again, an engine, slow, heavy. A plow, I assumed. That made sense. The county sometimes sent them out early when storms escalated faster than expected. I even felt a small wave of relief, knowing someone was already working the roads. But then I realized something that didn't sit right. Our road was private. The county didn't plow it. I stood up and walked to the front window, brushing aside the curtain just enough to see through the glass. The porch light illuminated a narrow cone of swirling snow, and beyond that, nothing. Visibility couldn't have been more than 20 feet, but I could hear the engine clearly now. It was close, too close. The sound grew louder, then stopped abruptly. No fading, no gradual slowdown, just silence. I waited, holding my breath, expecting to see flashing amber lights cut through the snow. Nothing appeared. I told myself the driver must have turned around, realized they were on the wrong road, and left. That explanation fit neatly enough, and I clung to it. I went back to the couch. 10 minutes passed. Then I heard it again. The engine restarted, louder this time, closer to the house. It moved slowly, like whoever was driving was being careful, inching forward rather than cruising through. My chest tightened. I returned to the window, this time stepping fully into view. I scanned the driveway, the street, the empty stretch of snow-covered ground where a vehicle should have been obvious. Still nothing. And then the engine cut off again, right outside. I felt that instinctive chill that has nothing to do with temperature, the feeling that something is wrong and your brain is about to catch up whether you want it to or not. I stepped back from the window and checked my phone. No new alerts, no messages. The storm had picked up, the wind howling hard enough to rattle the glass, snow packed against the door frame in uneven drifts. Then came the scraping sound, metal on concrete, slow, deliberate. It came from the front of the house. I froze in place, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe a branch dragging across the porch, maybe ice shifting, maybe debris blown loose by the wind. But I knew what it sounded like, a plow blade, lowering. I crept toward the door and leaned down, pressing my ear near the wood. The sound was unmistakable now, the steady push of something heavy moving snow, back and forth, short passes, like someone clearing a path. My driveway. Why would a plow clear my driveway in the middle of a blizzard, on a private road, with no lights on? I moved to the side window, careful to stay out of direct view, and peeked through the narrow gap between the frame and the curtain. That's when I saw it. A large vehicle sat at the edge of my driveway, partially obscured by snow. No flashing lights, no markings, just a dark silhouette with a wide front blade pressed to the ground. The cab windows were black. I couldn't see the driver. The plow moved again, pushing snow away from my garage door, creating a clean, deliberate path straight up to the house. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might hear it over the wind. I stepped back, my thoughts tangling over each other. Should I call someone? The power flickered again, lights dimming for a brief second before stabilizing. Then the plow stopped. The engine idled. I waited for the driver to get out, to walk up and knock, to explain the mistake. Instead, the engine shut off. Total silence. The storm seemed to pause with it, like the world itself was listening. Then I heard footsteps, heavy boots, crunching slowly through the snow. They stopped right outside my front door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. A moment passed, then another. No knock came, just the sound of someone standing there, shifting their weight, close enough that I could imagine their shadow through the door. My phone buzzed in my hand, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. A weather update, nothing else. The footsteps moved, not away, around the side of the house, toward the windows. I backed away, retreating down the hallway toward the bedroom, my mind screaming at me to hide, to lock myself in, to do something. Before I could reach the door, I heard a new sound, the slow scrape of metal against wood, the plow blade, pressing gently against my front door. Not ramming it, testing it. I locked myself in the bedroom and called 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher answered, her voice calm, but the call kept cutting in and out. I told her about the vehicle, the plow, the person outside. She asked for my address. When I gave it, she hesitated. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "there are no county vehicles assigned to your area tonight." I heard the scrape again, longer this time, harder. Then it stopped. By the time officers arrived nearly 40 minutes later, the driveway was buried again, the snow already reclaiming the cleared path. There was no plow, no tracks, no sign anyone had been there at all. They told me it was probably the storm playing tricks, maybe a private contractor who'd gotten turned around. But no one could explain why the driveway had been cleared so neatly, or why the scrape marks on my framework were still there the next morning. I stayed with a friend for the rest of the week, and every time it snows now, I listen for engines that come too close and stop too suddenly. The cold didn't feel real at first. It was the kind of cold that tricks you, dry, sharp, almost clean, like the air itself had been scrubbed of anything soft. I remember thinking that as I stepped out of my truck and shut the door behind me, the sound snapping too loud in the stillness. The parking area was empty except for my vehicle, its tires already crusted with ice from the drive-in. No wind yet, no snow falling, just a pale sky and a silence that felt wider than it should have been. I told myself it was good weather to be out here. The forecast had mentioned flurries later in the afternoon, maybe a temperature drop. Nothing dramatic. I'd checked twice before leaving. Still, I hesitated longer than I needed to, keys cold in my palm, staring out toward the open stretch ahead of me. The trailhead sign was half buried in snow, the lettering faded and chipped like it hadn't been maintained in years. I'd passed it dozens of times before without stopping. Today, for reasons I couldn't explain, it looked unfamiliar. I adjusted the straps on my pack and started walking. The snow on the ground was packed hard, old layers compressed into something closer to ice. Each step made a dull crunch that echoed farther than it should have. The trees lining the path stood bare and rigid, their branches reaching overhead like a frozen archway. There were no footprints ahead of me, none behind me either once I'd gone far enough that the parking area disappeared from view. That should have bothered me more than it did. At first, the quiet felt intentional, almost comforting. No traffic noise, no voices, no wind moving through the branches, just my breathing inside my scarf and the steady rhythm of my boots. I focused on that rhythm, letting it carry me forward, letting the thoughts I'd brought with me, unfinished conversations, unanswered messages, the heavy weight of needing space, fade into the background. About 20 minutes in, the light changed. It wasn't sudden. There was no dramatic shift, no obvious signal that something was wrong. The sky simply dulled, like someone had turned down the brightness by a notch. Shadows softened, the whites of the snow blurred into the grays of the trees. I stopped without realizing it, standing there with one boot lifted, listening. That was when I noticed the smell. Winter has a smell when it's about to turn. Anyone who's spent enough time outdoors knows it. Metallic, clean but sharp, the kind of scent that sits at the back of your throat. I told myself it meant snow was coming earlier than expected. That was all. I kept going. The trail narrowed as it climbed, curving gently to the left. I remembered this part. At least I thought I did. I'd never walked it alone before, always with someone else setting the pace, talking, laughing, filling the silence. Alone, everything felt stretched out,
each bend longer than I remembered, each straightaway offering less visibility than it should have. I rounded one of those bends and stopped again. There were footprints ahead of me. They weren't fresh, not crisp. The edges had softened under a dusting of new snow, but they were unmistakably human. Boot prints, spaced evenly, leading straight up the trail. I crouched slightly to look closer, noticing the tread pattern, deep lugs, the kind you'd expect on a heavy winter boot, bigger than mine.
I felt a flicker of relief. Someone else was out here. That meant the trail was passable. That meant I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. I straightened and followed them without thinking too hard about it. The prints continued for a while, always just ahead of me, never disappearing entirely, but never getting clearer either. The snowfall picked up slowly, flakes drifting down at an angle now as the wind finally began to move through the trees. Visibility shrank in subtle increments, 50 yards, then maybe 30. I checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't surprising. Battery was fine. Time read just after noon. I remember thinking I had plenty of daylight left. The trail split without warning. There was no signpost, no marker nailed to a tree, just a fork where the packed snow gave way to two equally worn paths. The footprints I'd been following continued, and then they didn't. They scattered, became unclear, overlapping in places where the snow had drifted. For a moment, I couldn't tell which direction they'd gone. I stood there longer than I should have, turning slowly, scanning both paths. The left branch dipped slightly, disappearing between thicker trees. The right climbed higher, curving out of sight behind a rise. I tried to remember which one was correct, replaying half-formed memories that refused to line up. I couldn't recall ever seeing this split before, and that realization tightened something in my chest. I chose the right path. It felt right in that vague, instinctive way people rely on when they don't have anything better. The incline was gradual but steady, my breath hogging heavier now as the air grew colder. The wind picked up enough to carry sound with it, branches creaking, snow whispering across the surface, the distant hollow rush of something moving far away. I walked for another 10 minutes before I realized something was wrong. The footprints were back. They hadn't continued from the fork. They hadn't led me here. They were already on this path, ahead of me, as if whoever made them had taken this route all along. I stopped, heart thudding louder than my breathing, and looked back toward where the trail split. I couldn't see it anymore. Snow was falling harder now, thick enough to blur the outlines of the trees. The path behind me looked no different from the one ahead, just a narrow channel carved through white and gray. I told myself the footprints must belong to someone who'd been ahead of me all along, someone I'd simply lost sight of near the fork. That explanation felt thin, but I accepted it anyway. Another sound carried through the air then. Not loud, not close, just out of place. It sounded like movement that didn't belong to the wind. A dull, rhythmic noise, irregular but deliberate. I turned slowly, scanning the trees on either side of the trail. My eyes struggled to adjust, trying to separate motion from illusion, shadow from shape. I didn't see anyone. The sound stopped. I waited, holding my breath without realizing it, until my lungs burned and I had to exhale.
When nothing else happened, I shook my head and started walking again, faster now, boots biting into the packed snow. The trail narrowed further. Branches brushed my shoulders, shedding clumps of snow down my back. The light dimmed another notch, the sky above pressing low and heavy. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time read 12:58. That was when the footprints changed. They began to space out differently, closer together in places, uneven in a way that suggested hesitation. I slowed without meaning to, my own steps falling more carefully now. A strange awareness settled over me, the sense that I was no longer just following a path, but being guided along it. I told myself that was ridiculous. And then I heard it again. This time, closer. A crunch of snow that didn't match my own movement. I stopped. The sound stopped too. My heart hammered hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. I turned in a slow circle, every sense stretched thin, every shadow suddenly suspicious. Snowflakes cling to my eyelashes, melting just enough to blur my vision. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I expected. The trees absorbed it. No answer, no movement, just that heavy, waiting silence pressing in around me. I stood there for a long moment, then took another step forward. The crunch came again, behind me. I spun around, breath catching sharp in my throat. The trail behind me was empty, no figure, no movement, just my own footprints leading back into the haze of falling snow. The sound I'd heard could have been a branch dropping its load, I told myself, could have been the wind shifting, could have been anything, but my skin prickled with the certainty that I was no longer alone. I didn't run. I wish I could say I did something smart or decisive. I didn't. I kept walking, telling myself that moving forward was better than standing still, that the trail had to lead somewhere familiar eventually. The snow kept falling, the light kept fading, and with every step, the distance between me and whatever was behind me felt smaller, even though I never once saw it. I don't know how long I walked after that. Time stopped behaving the way it normally does. Minutes stretched thin, then collapsed in on themselves. My breath came harder now, each inhale scraping my throat, each exhale vanishing too quickly into the cold. The trail began to slope downward, though I couldn't remember climbing high enough for a descent to make sense. That bothered me more than the sound, because the sound didn't come again right away. Instead, there was this growing awareness of space, of distance closing without anything visible crossing it, like standing in a dark room and knowing someone has taken a step closer, even though you can't see them move. I kept glancing over my shoulder, my neck aching from the tension of it, but every time I looked, the trail behind me was empty.
The footprints, however, were not. They were still there, always just ahead of me, just behind me, sometimes overlapping with my own in ways that made my stomach tighten. At one point, I stopped completely and looked down. One of the prints didn't match. It was deeper than the others, the toe pressed in harder, as if more weight had been placed on it. The tread pattern was different too, wider, more worn. I compared it to my own boot without thinking, lifting my foot and setting it next to the mark. It wasn't mine. I straightened slowly, forcing myself not to turn around too fast. My breath fogged thick in front of my face, and for a split second I thought I saw movement inside it, a shape that didn't disperse with the rest of the vapor. I blinked, and it was gone. The wind shifted then, finally strong enough to carry sound clearly. It rushed through the trees in uneven waves, bending branches, sending loose snow spiraling across the trail. Somewhere to my left, deeper in the woods, something cracked loudly, the sharp report echoing like a gunshot. I flinched, heart jumping into my throat. Still no voices, no shouting, no sign that anyone else was reacting to the noise. I checked my phone again, 1:12 p.m., battery down to 74%. The temperature indicator had disappeared entirely, replaced by a small warning icon I didn't recognize. That was when the trail vanished. Not gradually, not with warning. One moment I was following that narrow, packed path, and the next I stepped forward into untouched snow up to my shin. I stumbled, windmilling my arms to keep from falling, and stared down in disbelief. There was no trail ahead of me. I turned in a slow circle, panic finally seeping in around the edges of my thoughts. The woods looked the same in every direction, gray trunks, falling snow, low light flattening everything into a single depthless plain. The trail behind me had already begun to soften, my own footprints blurring as fresh snow filled them in. I tried to calm myself. This was how people got lost, I knew that, by letting fear take over too early. I told myself the trail couldn't have simply disappeared. I must have drifted off it without realizing, following those prints instead of the actual path. I took a step back, then another, trying to retrace my own footprints. They led nowhere. The realization hit me slowly, settling into my chest like a weight. I could see my prints from moments ago, but beyond that, the snow erased everything. There was no clear direction to go back the way I'd come. I stood there, breathing hard, listening. That was when I heard footsteps. Not behind me this time, to my right. They were slow, heavy, deliberate. Each crunch distinct, separated by a pause that felt intentional. I turned toward the sound, my heart slamming so hard I thought it might drown everything else out. Between the trees, about 30 yards away, something moved. At first I thought it was just a shadow shifting as the wind stirred the branches. Then it stepped forward. A person. They stood partially obscured by a cluster of trunks, facing me. I couldn't make out their face. Snow clung to their shoulders and hood, blending them into the background. They didn't wave, didn't speak, didn't move any closer. Relief surged through me so fast it nearly made me dizzy. "Hey!" I called out, my voice cracking. "Are you on the trail? I think I lost it." The figure tilted its head, just slightly, not like someone straining to hear, but like someone considering something. They took one step sideways, deeper into the trees, then stopped again. "Can you help me?" I asked, taking an instinctive step forward. The figure turned away. They didn't walk off quickly. They didn't run. They moved at a steady, unhurried pace, crunching through the snow without slipping, without hesitation, like they knew exactly where they were going. I hesitated only for a second. Then I followed. I told myself I had no choice, that standing still would be worse, that whoever this was clearly knew the area better than I did. The alternative, being alone in that white closing silence, felt unbearable.
I followed at a distance, careful not to call out again, watching the dark shape ahead of me weave between the trees. They never looked back, never acknowledged that I was there. The terrain changed subtly as we went. The ground sloped more sharply now, my steps growing heavier as the snow deepened. Branches snagged at my jacket, pulling me sideways, while the figure ahead moved through them effortlessly, leaving a path that seemed to close behind them almost immediately. My legs began to burn. The cold crept in around my toes, then my fingers, even through my gloves. I checked my phone again, the motion automatic. 1:27 p.m., battery at 61%. The entire crop of alert, the light was fading much faster than it should have been. The sky overhead had darkened to a dull, oppressive gray, the kind that suggested evening, not early afternoon. Snow fell thicker now, the flakes larger, wetter, clinging to my eyelashes and weighing down my hood. "Wait!" I called out, the word tearing loose before I could stop it. The figure stopped.
They stood completely still, back to me, shoulders rising and falling once. For a moment, I thought they might turn around. Instead, they lifted one arm and pointed, straight ahead. Then they lowered it and kept walking. My stomach dropped. Something about that gesture felt wrong. Not helpful, not reassuring. It felt rehearsed, like a signal, not a suggestion. I slowed, every instinct screaming at me to stop following, to turn around, to go anywhere but deeper into the woods. But when I looked back, I couldn't see where I'd come from anymore. Just trees, snow, shadows closing in. I followed. The woods grew quieter the farther we went, the wind fading until even the falling snow seemed muffled. My own breathing sounded too loud in my ears, every step an effort. The figure ahead finally stopped near a shallow depression in the ground, a natural dip where the snow lay undisturbed. They stood at the edge of it, and then they stepped aside. That was when I saw what they had been pointing at, something dark beneath the snow. Not earth, not rock, fabric. A scrap of it protruded from the white surface, barely visible unless you were looking for it. I approached slowly, dread pooling in my gut, and brushed away a thin layer of snow with my glove. A jacket, bright red, the color dulled by moisture and ice, half buried in the drift. One sleeve was twisted at an unnatural angle, the cuff stiff with frost. I sucked in a sharp breath and looked up. The figure was gone. No sound of footsteps retreating, no movement between the trees, just absence, sudden and complete, like they'd never been there at all. I stood alone in the quiet, staring down at the frozen jacket, a terrible understanding beginning to take shape in my mind. I don't remember kneeling down. One moment, I was standing there, staring at that strip of red fabric like my eyes were lying to me, and the next, my knees were in the snow, the cold seeping through my pants without registering properly. My hands moved on their own, brushing snow away in frantic, clumsy motions. The jacket was heavier than it looked. The fabric was stiff, frozen into strange folds that resisted my grip. Ice cracked softly as I pulled more of it free, revealing the shoulder, then the back. There was no body underneath it, just the jacket, half buried like it had been placed there and forgotten. That detail scared me more than if there had been something inside it. I sat back on my heels, breathing hard, my chest tight. The woods around me felt closer now, the trees leaning inward, their dark trunks hemming me in. I scanned the area wildly, half expecting the figure to reappear, to step out from behind one of the trees and explain everything. Nothing moved. No wind, no footsteps, no sound at all. My phone buzzed in my hand, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. I looked down, heart racing, only to see the battery warning flashing on the screen. 56%. I forced myself to stand, Staying there wasn't an option. Whatever this was, whatever I just walked into, it wasn't leading me somewhere safe. I backed away from the jacket slowly, never turning my back on the trees for more than a second, then spun around and started walking in what I hoped was the opposite direction. I picked a line and committed to it. That's what every survival article says to do when you're disoriented. Choose a direction and stick with it. Don't wander in circles. Don't panic. My boots broke through untouched snow with every step, the resistance exhausting. Within minutes, my thighs were burning, my breath coming in ragged bursts. The cold that I had managed to ignore earlier began to assert itself, biting at my fingers and toes, creeping inward with a slow, patient persistence. I kept expecting to hear something behind me. Footsteps, breathing, the crunch of snow that didn't match my own rhythm. But there was nothing. After what felt like an hour, but could only have been 10 or 15 minutes, I stopped again, bent over with my hands on my knees, gasping for air. Snow clung to my eyelashes, my eyebrows, melting just enough to sting my eyes. That's when I realized I was still following footprints. They appeared in front of me like they'd been waiting, a single line cutting through the snow at an angle that matched my path exactly. I stared at them, disbelief washing over me in a cold wave. I didn't make them. They were deeper than my own tracks, cleaner, as if they'd been pressed into the snow moments ago. I turned around slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears. The jacket was gone. The depression where it had been lay smooth and white now, the red fabric swallowed without a trace, no sign that anything had ever disturbed the snow there at all. A sound escaped me then, something between a gasp and a sob. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing, my mind scrambling for a rational explanation that refused to come. This wasn't possible. Snow doesn't erase itself like that. Jackets don't just disappear. Footprints don't just appear where you're walking, unless someone is walking with you. The thought lodged in my chest, heavy and immovable. I turned and ran, not blindly, not screaming, but with a kind of controlled desperation that burned through my muscles and sent sharp pain of my calves. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just needed distance, space, anything to break whatever pattern I'd fallen into. The woods blurred around me, trees flashing past, branches slapping at my arms and face. My breathing grew harsh and loud. Too loud, and I tasted metal at the back of my tongue. The cold air burned my lungs with every inhale. I tripped. My foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, a root, a rock I didn't know, and I went down hard, the impact knocking the breath from my body. I lay there for a second, stunned, staring up at the sky through a lattice of branches. It was darker now. Not evening dark, but dim enough that the world seemed drained of depth. Snow continued to fall in thick, steady sheets, the flakes large enough to stick to my eyelashes and blur my vision. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. The footprints ended right beside me. They didn't continue past where I'd fallen. They didn't veer off. They simply stopped. The last impression pressed deep into the snow, inches from my shoulder. I scrambled to my feet, backing away until my calves hit a tree trunk. My heart hammered so violently I thought I might black out. "Stop," I said out loud, my voice hoarse. "Please, just stop." The woods listened. For a long moment, nothing happened. No movement, no sound, just my own ragged breathing and the soft hiss of falling snow. Then, very slowly, something shifted directly in front of me. The figure emerged from between the trees, closer than before, close enough that I could see details now. The heavy coat, dark with moisture, the hood pulled low. Snow clung to them in uneven patches, like they'd been standing still for a long time. They didn't look at my face. Their head was angled slightly downward, gaze fixed somewhere near my chest, like they were counting something. "You're going the wrong way," they said. The voice was calm, flat, neither male nor female in a way I could pin down. The words carried easily through the cold air, unaffected by the snow.
I shook my head, my back pressed hard against the tree. I don't know where I am. I just want to get back to the trail. They tilted their head again. The trail doesn't go where you think it does. My hands trembled uncontrollably inside my gloves. Then where does it go? They lifted one arm and pointed. Not ahead of me, not behind me, straight down. My stomach lurched. The ground beneath my feet didn't look any different at first glance, just snow, packed a little firmer there, slightly darker beneath the surface. I stared at the spot they indicated, my mind refusing to process what they were implying. "There's nothing there," I said, though the words sounded thin even to me. The figure stepped closer. The air between us felt wrong, heavier somehow, like pressure building before a storm. I could smell them now, damp fabric, old cold, something faintly metallic underneath. You already saw it, you just didn't stay. A memory surged up unbidden, the red jacket, half buried, the empty space beneath it. "No," I whispered. The figure's shoulders rose and fell once, a motion that might have been a sigh. They don't like being followed, but they don't mind company. Something beneath the snow shifted, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed, a subtle settling like weight redistributing under a thin surface. I screamed then, pure instinct. My body moved before my mind could catch up, shoving off the tree and bolting sideways, away from the figure, away from the spot they'd pointed at. My foot slipped, but I stayed upright, adrenaline carrying me forward in a blind, stumbling sprint. Behind me, the snow gave way with a dull, hollow sound. The sound chased me. Not footsteps, not breathing, just that hollow, collapsing noise, like the earth itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every part of me knew that if I turned around, whatever was behind me would be closer than it should be. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt numb. Branches tore at my jacket, snow filled my boots, the woods sloped sharply downward, and I half slid, half fell through drifts that swallowed my shins, then my knees. Somewhere behind me, something moved through the snow with a steadiness that didn't match my panic. I burst through a stand of trees and nearly went over the edge of a drop. I skidded to a stop just in time, arms flailing, heart slamming into my ribs. The ground fell away into a shallow ravine, not deep enough to kill you outright, but steep and uneven, the kind that would break bones and trap you if you fell the wrong way. I didn't hesitate. I slid down it. Snow and ice tore at my clothes as I went, my body bouncing awkwardly. Pain flared sharp and bright in my shoulder when I hit something hard. I lay there for a second, stunned. The world rang. My vision swam. Snow drifted down from above, filling in my tracks almost immediately. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. I lay there for a second, stunned. The world rang. My vision swam. Snow drifted down from above, filling in my tracks almost immediately. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. I lay there for a second, stunned. The world rang. My vision swam. Snow drifted down from above, filling in my tracks almost immediately. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. I lay there for a second, stunned. The world rang. My vision swam. Snow drifted down from above, filling in my tracks almost immediately. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. I lay there for a second, stunned. The world rang. My vision swam. Snow drifted down from above, filling in my tracks almost immediately. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. I lay there for a second, stunned. The world rang. My vision swam. Snow drifted down from above, filling in my tracks almost immediately. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. The woods blurred around me, trees flashing past, branches slapping at my arms and face. My breathing grew harsh and loud, too loud, and I tasted metal at the back of my tongue. The cold air burned my lungs with every inhale. I tripped.
My foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, a root, a rock, I didn't know, and I went down hard, the impact knocking the breath from my body. I lay there for a second, stunned, staring up at the sky through a lattice of branches. It was darker now. Not evening dark, but dim enough that the world seemed drained of depth. Snow continued to fall in thick, steady sheets, the flakes large enough to stick to my eyelashes and blur my vision. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. The footprints ended right beside me. They didn't continue past where I'd fallen. They didn't veer off. They simply stopped. The last impression pressed deep into the snow, inches from my shoulder. I scrambled to my feet, backing away until my calves hit a tree trunk. My heart hammered so violently I thought I might black out. "Stop," I said out loud, my voice hoarse. "Please, just stop." The woods listened. For a long moment, nothing happened. No movement, no sound, just my own ragged breathing and the soft hiss of falling snow. Then, very slowly, something shifted directly in front of me. The figure emerged from between the trees, closer than before. Close enough that I could see details now. The heavy coat, dark with moisture. The hood pulled low. Snow clung to them in uneven patches, like they'd been standing still for a long time. They didn't look at my face. Their head was angled slightly downward, gaze fixed somewhere near my chest, like they were counting something. "You're going the wrong way," they said. The voice was calm, flat, neither male nor female in a way I could pin down. The words carried easily through the cold air, unaffected by the snow. I shook my head, my back pressed hard against the tree. "I don't know where I am. I just want to get back to the trail." They tilted their head again. "The trail doesn't go where you think it does," they replied. My hands trembled uncontrollably inside my gloves. "Then where does it go?" They lifted one arm and pointed. Not ahead of me, not behind me, straight down. My stomach lurched. The ground beneath my feet didn't look any different at first glance, just snow packed a little firmer there, slightly darker beneath the surface. I stared at the spot they indicated, my mind refusing to process what they were implying. "There's nothing there," I said, though the words sounded thin even to me. The figure stepped closer. The air between us felt wrong, heavier somehow, like pressure building before a storm. I could smell them now, damp fabric, old cold, something faintly metallic underneath. They already saw it, you just didn't stay. A memory surged up unbidden, the red jacket, half buried, the empty space beneath it. "No," I whispered. The figure's shoulders rose and fell once, a motion that might have been a sigh. They don't like being followed, but they don't mind company. Something beneath the snow shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticed, a subtle settling, like weight redistributing under a thin surface. I screamed then, pure instinct. My body moved before my mind could catch up, shoving off the tree and bolting sideways, away from the figure, away from the spot they'd pointed at. My foot slipped, but I stayed upright, adrenaline carrying me forward in a blind, stumbling sprint. Behind me, the ground gave way with a dull, hollow sound. The sound chased me, not footsteps, not breathing, just that hollow, collapsing noise, like the earth itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every part of me knew that if I turned around, whatever was behind me would be closer than it should be. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt numb. Branches tore at my jacket, snow filled my boots. The woods sloped sharply downward, and I half slid, half fell through drifts that swallowed my shins, then my knees. Somewhere behind me, something moved through the snow with a steadiness that didn't match my panic. I burst through a stand of trees and nearly went over the edge of a drop. I skidded to a stop just in time, arms flailing, heart slamming into my ribs. The ground fell away into a shallow ravine, not deep enough to kill you outright, but steep and uneven, the kind that would break bones and trap you if you fell the wrong way.
I didn't hesitate. I slid down it. Snow and ice tore at my clothes as I went, my body bouncing awkwardly, pain flaring sharp and bright in my shoulder when I hit something hard. I landed at the bottom in a heap, the impact driving the air from my lungs in a choking gasp. I lay there for a second, stunned.
The world rang. My vision swam. Snow drifted down from above, filling in my tracks almost immediately. I rolled onto my side and forced myself to breathe, shallow and fast, until the pain dulled enough for me to think. I was still alive. I pushed myself upright, ignoring the way my shoulder screamed in protest. The ravine curved gently away from where I'd come, its sides rising just enough to block my view of the trees above. That was when I realized how quiet it was. The wind had died completely. The falling snow made almost no sound down here, insulated by the narrow walls. Even my breathing seemed too loud, like it might carry farther than it should. I held still, listening. Nothing followed me down. No crunch of snow, no shifting weight, no calm, flat voice telling me I was going the wrong way. I didn't feel relief. I felt watched. I moved again, slower now, careful with each step. The ravine bottom was uneven, cluttered with rocks and fallen branches buried under snow. I kept one hand against the wall for balance, wincing every time my shoulder twinged. After several minutes, the ravine opened up. Trees thinned, the ground leveled, and ahead of me, through the falling snow, I saw something dark and vertical cutting across the white. A fence. I nearly cried at the sight of it. I staggered toward it, my legs shaking, and grabbed hold of the weathered wooden slats. They were real, solid, splintered under my gloves. I leaned my forehead against them, breathing hard, letting the cold wood ground me. A fence meant land boundaries. Land boundaries meant roads, buildings, people. I followed it, staying close, afraid to let it out of my sight. The fence led downhill, curving gently, and after what felt like forever, but was probably only another 10 minutes, a shape emerged through the snow. A structure. Small, squat, a hunting cabin or storage shed, its roof heavy with snow, a single window dark and rimmed with ice. No smoke from a chimney, no light inside. I didn't care. I pounded on the door with my good hand, shouting hoarsely, my voice cracking. "Hello? Please, anyone?" Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I slumped against the door, my knees giving out, sliding down until I was sitting in the snow. The adrenaline that had carried me this far drained away all at once, leaving behind shaking exhaustion and creeping cold. I checked my phone with numb fingers. 18%. No signal. I laughed then, a broken, hysterical sound that surprised me as much as anything else that had happened. I pressed my forehead to my knees and forced myself to think. The fence. Follow the fence. I stood again, every movement deliberate now, and kept going. The snow eased slightly, thinning just enough that the world gained a little depth back. The fence ended near a cluster of trees, and beyond them I saw something I hadn't realized I was desperate for until that moment. A road. 2 dark lines cut through the snow, tire tracks half filled but unmistakable.
I stumbled onto it and turned in a slow circle, shouting again, my voice echoing down the empty stretch. Then I heard an engine. Headlights appeared through the falling snow, distant at first, then closer, growing brighter. I waved my arms frantically, stumbling into the road without thinking. The vehicle slowed hard, tires crunching, then stopped a few yards away. A door opened. A man stepped out, bundled in a heavy coat, his expression shifting from annoyance to alarm when he saw me. "Jesus, are you okay?" he asked. I tried to answer and couldn't. My legs buckled, and I would have fallen if he hadn't rushed forward and caught me. Everything after that came in fragments. A truck cab blasting heat that hurt my skin, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, someone asking my name over and over until I managed to say it, a radio crackling as he called for help. They told me later that a search party had already been forming, that a storm cell had rolled in faster than predicted, that people went missing in those woods more often than anyone liked to admit. They asked me if I'd seen anyone else out there. I told them about the footprints, the jacket, the figure who led me off the trail. They exchanged looks they tried very hard to keep neutral. One of them asked me to describe the jacket. When I said it was red, his mouth tightened slightly. They found it the next spring, after the snow melted, not in the ravine, not near the trail, but several miles deeper in the woods, near a sinkhole that had collapsed under winter ice. It belonged to a woman who'd gone missing 3 years earlier. Her body was never recovered. They never asked me about the figure again. I don't hike alone anymore. And when winter comes and the snow starts falling in that slow, steady way that makes everything feel quiet and close, I think about how easy it was to follow someone who never once said my name.
Story 2. The Lights on County Road 47. I was driving home from a late shift when it started snowing. Not the gentle kind, the heavy, fast-moving kind that eats up visibility and makes even familiar roads feel wrong. County Road 47 was the fastest way back to my place, a long, empty stretch that cut through farmland and patches of forest. I'd driven it hundreds of times without thinking twice. That night, though, the road felt longer than usual, like the darkness ahead kept stretching just out of reach of my headlights. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to. There were no other cars out, no houses with lights on, just snow streaking sideways across my windshield. About 10 minutes in, I saw something ahead. Lights. Not headlights. Stationary lights. They were low to the ground, lined up in a loose row just off the side of the road, glowing a dull yellow through the falling snow. At first, I thought it was farm equipment, maybe a tractor parked too close to the shoulder. Then I got closer. They weren't moving, they weren't blinking, and they weren't attached to anything I could see. I eased off the gas, my heart starting to thump harder. The lights were arranged almost deliberately, spaced evenly, forming a rough boundary along the tree line. Beyond them, the woods were pitch black, swallowing whatever the lights were attached to, if they were attached to anything at all. I checked my mirrors. Still no cars. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, startling me. I glanced down just long enough to see no service before looking back up. The lights were closer now, and one of them had turned off. Not faded, not flickered, just gone. I swallowed and kept driving. Another light went out, then another. Each one extinguished as I passed it, like something was tracking my position, shutting them down one by one as I moved forward. My breath felt shallow, my chest tight, my fingers numb against the wheel. I kept my eyes locked on the road, afraid that if I looked too closely at the tree line, I'd see something standing just beyond the glow. Halfway down the row, I noticed movement.
Something parallel to my car, just inside the trees. It moved smoothly, keeping pace with me, always just beyond the reach of my headlights. I couldn't see details, just a darker shape against the darker background, slipping between trunks with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. I pressed harder on the gas. The engine whined, the car picking up speed, but the shape didn't fall behind. It stayed with me, matching my acceleration, the lights going out faster now as I passed them. I didn't know where I was anymore. County Road 47 should have intersected with the highway by now. I should have seen signs, reflectors, anything familiar. Instead, the road stretched on, swallowed by snow and darkness. The last light went out. Everything beyond my headlights vanished. And then the car died. The engine cut abruptly, the steering wheel locking up as momentum carried me forward a few more feet before I rolled to a stop. The dashboard went dark. The radio display disappeared. Silence rushed in. I sat there, stunned, my breath loud in the cab. I tried the ignition. Nothing, not even a click. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Then I heard footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, crunching softly on the shoulder of the road. Not running, not rushing, just approaching, steady and patient. I stayed perfectly still. The footsteps stopped near my driver's side door. A shadow passed in front of my headlights, briefly blocking the beam. I squeezed my eyes shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. There was a knock, gentle, polite. I opened my eyes. Someone was standing outside my window. I could see them now, bundled in a heavy coat, face hidden by a hood pulled low. Snow clung to their shoulders, melting slowly into dark patches. They leaned down slightly, close enough that I could see frost on the fabric near their mouth. "Your lights are off," they said. Their voice was calm, almost kind. I swallowed hard. "My car died," I managed. I need help." They nodded once, like they'd expected that answer. "There's a place up ahead. You can wait there." I shook my head immediately. "I'm not getting out of the car."
The figure straightened, stepping back just enough that their face stayed hidden in shadow. For a moment, they didn't say anything. Then they pointed. Not toward the road ahead, not behind me, but toward the trees where the lights had been. They said, "You already passed it." My phone buzzed in the cup holder, startling me so badly I nearly screamed. I glanced down. 1 bar of service. A missed call notification from an unknown number. I looked back up. The road was empty. No figure, no footprints, no sound. The engine turned over on the next try. I didn't wait. I floored it, tires screaming as I sped down the road until the highway signs finally appeared out of the snow like a miracle. I didn't slow down until I was home, doors locked, lights on in every room. The next morning, I checked the news. A woman went missing on County Road 47 the night before. Her car was found abandoned on the shoulder, engine cold, lights off. A few miles from where I'd stopped. They never found her. I don't take County Road 47 anymore. And every winter, when the snow starts falling hard enough to erase the edges of the world, I think about those lights, how they turned off one by one, like something counting.
Story 3. The cabin that wasn't empty. The cabin wasn't supposed to be occupied. That was the entire reason I booked it. It was a small, off-grid rental tucked deep into the northern stretch of Maine, far enough from the nearest town that cell service was listed as unlikely. The listing made a point of it. No neighbors, no traffic, no distractions, just trees, snow, and quiet. Exactly what I needed. I arrived just before sunset, the sky already dim and heavy with clouds. Snow had started falling about an hour earlier, soft but steady, coating the dirt access road in a clean, unbroken layer. I noticed immediately that there were no tire tracks ahead of me. That should have been reassuring. I parked beside the cabin, stepped out into the cold, and listened. Nothing. No wind through the trees, no animals, no distant engines, just the faint hiss of snow settling on wood. Inside, the place was exactly as advertised. 1 room, a small kitchenette, a wood stove against the far wall, and a narrow hallway leading to a bedroom and bathroom. It smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old wood, unused. I locked the door behind me, started a fire, and unpacked. Within half an hour, the cabin was warm enough to take my gloves off, and I felt that familiar sense of relief settle in, like my body was finally unclenching after weeks of noise and stress. The first night passed without incident. I slept deeply, the kind of sleep you only get when there's nothing waiting for you in the morning. When I woke, the snow had stopped. Sunlight filtered through the small windows, reflecting off the white outside so brightly it almost hurt to look at. I made coffee on the stove, pulled on my boots, and stepped outside to gather more firewood. That's when I saw the footprints. They came from the tree line. A single set pressed deep into the snow, leading straight to the front door of the cabin. I stood there for a long moment, staring at them, my breath fogging in front of my face.
They hadn't been there when I arrived. The snow had been falling steadily then. Any tracks would have been covered, which meant whoever made them had come sometime during the night. I followed the prints a short distance away from the cabin, my heart beating faster with every step. They didn't circle the building. They didn't wander. They went directly from the trees to the door and then stopped. No prints leading away. I told myself the obvious explanations first. Maybe the owner had stopped by early. Maybe someone had gotten turned around in the woods and approached the cabin before realizing it was occupied. Still, I checked the lock. It hadn't been tampered with. I went back inside, bolted the door, and kept the fire going. For the next few hours, I stayed alert, jumping at every sound the cabin made as it warmed and shifted. But nothing happened. No knocks, no movement outside, no new tracks. By midday, the fear started to feel embarrassing. I decided to take a walk. The snow was pristine beyond the cabin, untouched except for the same trail of footprints. I followed them again, this time farther, curious despite myself. They led deeper into the woods, weaving between trees with purpose, never hesitating. After about 15 minutes, I heard something ahead of me. A crunch. Not the random settling of snow. A footstep. I froze. The woods went completely still, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing in on you. I scanned the trees, my eyes darting from trunk to trunk, expecting movement. Nothing. "Hello?" I called out, hating how small my voice sounded. No answer. I turned around and walked back to the cabin as fast as I could without breaking into a run. I packed up immediately. I didn't bother cleaning. I didn't finish my coffee. I just threw my things into my bag, doused the fire, and stepped back outside. That's when I noticed something new. Another set of footprints. Fresh. They ran parallel to mine, close enough that whoever made them had been walking beside me in the woods. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove until the trees thinned and the road became familiar again. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station with lights and people. Later, when I contacted the owner, he apologized profusely. He said no one else had access to the property, and that cabin hadn't been rented for weeks before me.
Story 4. The Voice Beneath the Ice. Every winter, when the lake froze thick enough to walk on, we went out there. It was never anything dramatic. No bonfires, no parties, just me, my cousin Erin, and her boyfriend Mark, bundled up in layers, walking across the ice with our hands in our pockets like we'd done it 100 times before. The lake sat outside a small town in northern Minnesota, surrounded by trees and nothing else. No houses along the shore, no docks, just a wide, flat stretch of frozen water that reflected the sky in a way that made everything feel larger and emptier than it really was. That night, the temperature dropped fast. The ice groaned occasionally beneath our boots, the low, distant sound echoing across the surface. Erin joked about it, saying the lake was talking, but I could tell she was a little on edge too. We all were. Still, the ice was solid. It had been below freezing for weeks.
We walked out farther than usual, maybe 100 feet from shore, when Mark stopped. "Did you hear that?" he asked. We listened. At first, there was nothing, just the wind brushing lightly across the ice. Then it came again, a sound from beneath us. It wasn't a crack, it wasn't the groan of shifting ice. It sounded like a voice, faint, muffled, like someone shouting underwater. Aaron laughed nervously. "That's not funny." "I didn't do anything," Mark said. The sound came again, clearer this time, still distorted, but unmistakably human. A long, drawn-out call that rose and fell, as if someone was trying to yell, but couldn't quite get enough air. My stomach dropped. "Okay," I said, "we're leaving." We turned back toward shore, our steps faster now, boots sliding slightly on the slick surface. The voice followed. It moved with us, always beneath, always distant, but never fading completely. I could feel the vibration of it through the soles of my boots, a low hum that made my teeth ache. Halfway back, Erin stumbled and grabbed my arm. "I hear words," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you don't." But when the sound came again, I heard it too. Not clear sentences, just fragments, broken syllables stretched and warped by the ice and water. It sounded like begging. We broke into a run. The voice grew louder. The ice beneath us began to crack, not sharply, but with long spiderweb sounds that shot panic straight through my chest. I didn't look down. I didn't look back. I just ran, dragging Aaron with me while Mark stayed just ahead, shouting for us to keep moving. When we reached the shore, the voice stopped. Instantly, like someone had cut a microphone. We stood there, gasping for breath, staring back out over the lake. The surface looked unchanged, smooth, silent, empty. None of us spoke the entire drive home. The next day, Erin called me. Her voice was shaky. "Did you hear about the lake?" A man had gone missing 2 towns over the previous winter. He'd fallen through thin ice during a snowstorm. His body was never recovered. The lake was drained partially that spring for maintenance. They didn't find him. They found something else. Deep grooves carved at the underside of the ice, stretching for hundreds of feet. Long marks as if something had been moving beneath the surface, over and over again, dragging itself. We never went back to that lake, but sometimes, when the temperature drops suddenly and everything outside goes quiet, I swear I can still hear it. Muffled, calling.
Story 5. The delivery that kept calling back. The order came in just after 10 p.m. I remember checking the address twice because it was farther out than anything I usually accepted. An unlit stretch of road outside rural eastern Ohio, where the neighborhoods thin out and the trees start swallowing the houses whole. Normally, I would have declined it, but it was snowing lightly. The roads were empty, and I'd already had a slow night. I told myself it would be quick, drop the food, get paid, head home. The drive itself was quiet in that unsettling way winter roads get after dark. No other headlights, no radio chatter, just my tires humming over cold pavement and the soft tick of sleet hitting the windshield. When my GPS finally told me I'd arrived, I almost laughed. There was no neighborhood,
just a narrow gravel drive cutting through the trees, ending at a single house set back far from the road. One porch light was on, everything else was dark. I pulled in and parked, leaving the engine running. As soon as I opened my door, the cold hit hard, the kind that stings your lungs when you breathe too deep. I grabbed the bag, walked up to the porch and knocked. From inside I heard voices, a lot of them, laughter, overlapping conversation. It sounded like a crowded room full of people talking at once, loud enough that I hesitated, confused. The house wasn't big enough to hold that many people. Then the door opened. A man stood there, smiling. He was older, maybe late 50s, wearing a sweater that looked too thin for the weather. Behind him, the hallway was dark, no movement, no signs of a party, but the voices were still going. "They'll be glad you came," he said. I blinked. "I just need a signature." "Why don't you bring it inside?" he asked, stepping back slightly. "You're working late. They appreciate that." The way he said "they" made my skin prickle. I shook my head. Company policy. The laughter behind him stopped instantly. The silence was so abrupt it felt artificial, like someone had pressed pause on a recording. The man's smile faltered for half a second before returning, tighter this time. "That's a shame," he said. I set the bag down, took a step back, and turned toward my car. Behind me, the voices started again, only now they were wrong. They weren't overlapping anymore. They were repeating the same few phrases over and over, out of sync, like broken audio looping on itself. I didn't look back. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove until the house disappeared in my rear-view mirror. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird encounter, an overactive imagination. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Missed call. From the delivery number. I hadn't given them my phone. I blocked it. The next night I got another order. Same address, same distance. I declined it immediately. The order kept coming back. 3 nights in a row. I stopped doing deliveries after that. A week later I looked up the address. There was no house listed there. Just woods.
Story 6. The Man Outside the Store. I was working overnight at a small grocery store in western Pennsylvania, the kind that closed early on holidays and only stayed open late for restocking. The parking lot lights were dimmed after midnight, leaving most of the building wrapped in shadow. It was the night after Christmas. The store was technically closed to customers, which meant I was alone. No manager, no co-workers, just me, the hum of the refrigerators, and the quiet creak of shelves settling as the building cooled. I spent the first hour restocking what little had sold the day before. After that, there wasn't much to do. I walked the aisles slowly, straightening labels, killing time. That's when I noticed him. He was standing outside the front windows, closer than anyone had any reason to be at that hour. Not near the doors, not walking past, just standing there. At first, I thought maybe he needed help. Maybe his car had broken down. I stepped closer to the glass, squinting into the darkness. He noticed me immediately. Instead of stepping back, he moved closer, right up to the window. He didn't knock, he didn't wave, he just stared. His face was pale under the parking lot lights, his breath fogging the glass as he leaned in. His eyes stayed locked on me, unblinking, like he was studying something. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I waited for him to do something, anything, but he didn't. After a few seconds that felt far too long, I turned away, pretending I wasn't bothered. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was messing around. A few minutes later, I worked up the nerve to check again. He was gone. Relief washed over me, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I went back to wandering the aisles, the store feeling a little too big now. About 10 minutes passed. I turned the corner at the end of one aisle and stopped dead. Several boxes had been knocked off the shelves and scattered across the floor. Heavy ones, not something that would have fallen on its own. Before I could react, I heard it. A laugh. Soft, low, close. It came from the other end of the aisle, just out of sight. It didn't sound natural. It was slow and deliberate, like someone imitating laughter without understanding how it was supposed to sound. My heart started racing. I backed away quietly, my footsteps muffled by the linoleum. I didn't want to confront whoever it was. I didn't want to find out why he was inside. I ran to the front, pushed through the doors, and sprinted to my car while dialing 911. When the police arrived, the store was empty. Security footage told a different story. They showed me the tape later. The man had slipped in through a side door while I was restocking. He hid behind the shelves, watching me walk past. In his hand was a small knife. They said he was likely intoxicated, maybe looking for shelter, maybe looking for trouble. All I know is that if I'd walked down that aisle a few seconds earlier, I don't think I would have made it out.
Story 7. The Wrong Ride Home. It was New Year's Eve, and I didn't even want to go out. I'm not a party person. I never have been. Loud rooms, crowded houses, people drinking past their limits. It all makes me uneasy. But it was one of those nights where saying no felt harder than just going along with it. So I went. The party was at a large house outside suburban Illinois, the kind of place that sat back from the road with a long driveway and no close neighbors. By midnight, there were at least 30 people there. Music, drinks, laughter. It was everything I usually avoid. By around 3 a.m., I'd had enough. I went upstairs to find my friend who'd driven me, only to discover him passed out on a bed, shoes still on, completely unresponsive. No chance he was driving any time soon. I didn't want to wake anyone else, so I stepped outside and ordered an Uber. The app said 10 minutes. I sat down at the end of the driveway, pulling my jacket tight as the cold seeped through my jeans. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens late at night in winter.
No traffic, no distant sounds, just the faint hum of wind moving through bare trees. A car pulled up behind me. "Uber?" a man called out. I stood up without really thinking and walked over. I was tired, buzzed, and just wanted to be home. I opened the back door and got in. The car started moving almost immediately. The driver was older, maybe in his 50s, with short dark hair and a thick beard. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Big night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, not really interested in talking. He smiled faintly, but there was something off about it. Too tight, too practiced. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. My phone buzzed in my hand. I opened my eyes and looked down. A notification from the Uber app. "Your driver has arrived at the pickup location." My stomach dropped. I looked back up at the mirror. The man was already watching me. Our eyes met and he didn't look away. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I locked my phone and leaned my head back again, forcing myself to breathe slowly, pretending nothing was wrong. The car slowed at a red light. As soon as it stopped, I opened the door and jumped out. The car lurched forward as I fell, scraping my hands and knees against the pavement. I didn't stop. I got up and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't see him again. I made it to a gas station a few blocks away and stayed there until the real Uber arrived. I still think about how easily it could have gone differently. How close I came to not realizing in time.
Story 8. The Locked Room Upstairs. It was the first weekend of February, and I had the house to myself. Work had given me a rare stretch of days off, and I planned to do absolutely nothing with them. No plans, no visitors, just quiet. The kind of quiet you don't notice until you're alone long enough to relax into it. Sometime that afternoon, I thought I heard a noise upstairs. It was faint, more of a thud than anything else, not loud enough to be alarming, just strange enough that it caught my attention. I paused the TV and listened. Nothing followed. I went upstairs anyway, more curious than concerned. I checked my bedroom, the bathroom, the spare room at the end of the hall. Everything looked normal. I forgot about it within minutes. That evening, while sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone, I heard it again. The same sound, dull, heavy, like something shifting its weight. I turned off the TV and listened more carefully this time. The house was otherwise silent. No wind, no pipes, no obvious explanation. I checked upstairs again. Still nothing. I told myself it had to be the house settling. Old buildings make noise. Everyone knows that. I went to bed shortly after, convincing myself I was being ridiculous. The next morning, something felt off immediately. Not in a dramatic way, just small things. The cereal box in the pantry looked like it had been moved. The fridge door felt warmer than it should have been, like it had been opened recently. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the shelves, trying to remember how I'd left things. I couldn't. The rest of the day passed without incident, but the feeling never went away. That sense that something wasn't quite right, like walking into a room mid-conversation. Just after sunset, I heard the sound again. This time, I was certain it came from upstairs.
I stood up, my heart beating faster than it should have, and walked toward the staircase. As I reached the bottom step, I heard a click. Soft, mechanical. It sounded like a lock. I went up slowly, each step creaking louder than usual in the quiet house. At the top of the stairs, I turned toward the spare bedroom. The door was closed. That wasn't how I'd left it. I reached for the handle and tried to turn it. It stopped halfway, locked. My chest tightened instantly. The spare room didn't have a lock on the outside. It only locked from within. I stepped back, my mind racing. Then I heard movement on the other side of the door. Slow footsteps approaching. I didn't wait to see it open. I ran down the stairs, out the front door, and didn't stop until I reached the end of the street. I called 911 with shaking hands, trying to explain what I'd heard without sounding insane. When police searched the house, they found no one. But in the spare room closet, there were grocery bags, empty bottles, a blanket. Someone had been living there for at least 2 days, probably longer. They told me the locks showed signs of use, like someone had been careful to only move when I was distracted or asleep. I moved out the following week. I still don't know how long they were there before I noticed, and I don't let myself think about what might have happened if I hadn't tried that door.
Story 9. The Footprints in the Blizzard. I stayed in that night because the storm was bad enough that everything felt muted. The kind of snowstorm where the world shrinks to whatever's inside your windows. Street lights blur, sound disappears, even time feels slower. I had the TV on low, mostly for background noise, and I drifted in and out of sleep on the couch without really meaning to. That was when I heard it. Footsteps. Not inside, outside my front door. They were heavy enough to cut through the storm, boots crunching against snow-covered wood. I sat up, suddenly wide awake, staring at the door. No knock, just the sound of someone standing there. The footsteps shifted slightly, like the person was adjusting their weight. Then they moved again, 2 slow steps, followed by silence. It sounded like they stepped off the porch. Confused, I got up and peeked through the front window. The snowfall was worse than I realized, thick white, swirling so densely that I could barely see the end of my driveway, but I could make out footprints in the snow. They came up to the porch and then veered off, disappearing into the storm. I checked the side and back windows next, my heart beating faster. No movement, no shapes in the yard, nothing but snow. I went back to the couch, uneasy, but telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe someone had gone to the wrong house. Maybe they realized it and left. I must have fallen asleep again, because the next thing I remember was opening my eyes to darkness.
The TV was still on, but it had gone to that dim screensaver mode. The clock read 3:02 a.m. Something sounded different. The storm was louder, not muffled like before, not distant. It sounded like it was inside. I sat up fast and turned on the lamp. Water spots dotted the floor, leading away from the front door. Melted snow dripping in uneven patterns across the rug. The door was open. Cold air poured into the house, carrying snow with it. White flakes swirled across the entryway, piling against the walls. Boot prints marked the floor. They came inside, down the hallway, and then back out again. Whoever had come in hadn't rushed. The prints were evenly spaced, deliberate, like they'd taken their time looking around. I locked myself in the bathroom and called for help, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. The police said it looked like a burglary attempt. Nothing was taken. Nothing was disturbed. They told me I was lucky, but that's not what keeps me up at night. What I can't stop thinking about is the fact that I was asleep on the couch the entire time, and whoever walked through my house either didn't notice me or noticed me and chose not to wake me.
Story 10. The Motel at mile marker 312. I was already regretting the drive. Winter storms make everything feel longer, heavier, like the road itself is working against you. I was crossing central Wyoming, heading east to spend Christmas with family, and I had underestimated how fast the weather could turn. Snow came down hard before noon. By late afternoon, visibility was bad enough that I knew I wasn't going to make it to my destination. The highway was nearly empty, just long stretches of white and the occasional semi creeping along with its hazard lights on. I had my dog with me, a small dachshund named Milo, which ruled out flying and made stopping unavoidable. When I saw a faded sign for a motel at mile marker 312, I took it without thinking twice. The exit ramp was barely plowed. The motel sat a few hundred yards off the road, a low, single-story building with most of its lights turned off. One car sat in the parking lot near the office, no other movement. I left the engine running and hurried inside to check in. The door to the office was locked. I wiped the snow from the window and pressed my face closer to the glass. The inside was dark. No desk lamp, no TV glow, nothing that suggested anyone was working. Behind me, Milo started barking. I turned. 2 men were walking across the parking lot toward my car. Something about the way they moved made my stomach tighten. They weren't rushing. They weren't reacting to the storm. They were watching me. I stepped back toward my car, but they adjusted their path, subtly blocking me from getting there first. "Is it open?" one of them asked. His voice was calm, almost casual. "I don't think so," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Looks closed." They exchanged a glance. "Any chance you could help us out?" the other one asked. "Our car's having trouble. We just need a little gas." The first man stepped closer.
too close. I shook my head. Sorry, I can't. I tried to move past them, but one of them shifted again, cutting me off. Milo's barking turned into frantic whining from inside the car. "Come on," said the man. "It's freezing out here." The snow was coming down so hard now that the highway behind us had disappeared completely. For a brief, terrifying moment, I understood how isolated this place really was. I didn't answer. I backed up, circled wide around them, and broke into a run. They followed, not sprinting, not yelling, just fast enough to let me know they could. I got to my car, yanked the door open, threw myself inside, and locked it just as they reached the windows. One of them knocked hard. "Hey," he said, smiling through the glass. "You don't have to be like that." I threw the car into reverse and fishtailed out of the lot, snow spraying everywhere as I hit the road. I didn't stop driving until I reached the next town, nearly 40 miles away. I called the police as soon as I was somewhere safe. They checked the motel later that night. No staff, no guests, no men. Their car was gone too. The officer told me it was probably nothing, just two guys stranded trying to get help. But here's the part I can't explain. When I looked back at the motel as I was driving away, I saw lights turn on in one of the rooms, just one, and someone standing in the window, watching the road.